5 years of letters, 5 years of silence. And still she stood at that fence every evening waiting for a dead man she didn't know was gone. The whole town whispered about the Boston schoolteacher who couldn't let go, but Delilah Warren didn't care what they said. She'd made a promise, and promises meant something. Then, one dusty afternoon, a cowboy rode up and asked the question that would shatter everything. "Ma'am, what keeps you waiting out here?" The answer would change both their lives forever. Before we begin, if you love stories of loyalty, heartbreak, and second chances, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Stay with me until the very end. You won't believe where this journey takes us. And comment below with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far Delilah's story has traveled across the world. The envelope felt wrong. Delilah Warren's hands shook as she sealed it, the same tremor that had started appearing 6 months ago, her body betraying what her mind refused to admit. She pressed the wax down harder than necessary. "5th one this year, Miss Warren." Jeremiah didn't look up from his ledger. Nobody in Clearwater looked at her anymore when she mailed these letters. "I'm aware. 5 years is... I know how long it's been." The words came out sharper than intended. Jeremiah's jaw tightened, but he took the letter without another word. "Samuel Donovan, care of Territorial Office. Denver forwarding requested." Same address. Same hope. Same silence. Delilah walked out into afternoon heat that made her classroom dress stick to her back. Chalk dust still coated her fingers. The children had been impossible today, restless watching the horizon. Word had spread about the cattle drive coming through. The fence post waited at town's edge. She'd never meant to claim it, but 5 years of evening stops had made it hers. From here, you could see 3 directions: east toward the territories, west toward mountains, south toward the trail. Today, dust rose in the south. Her heart betrayed her. Again. "He's not coming," Sarah Miller's voice. Delilah didn't turn. "You don't know that. It's been 12 years since the war ended. If he meant to... He was injured. He needed time to heal to save money. The territories are hard. Maybe he couldn't... make excuses." The words hit like a slap. Sarah's son hadn't come home from that war either. Her face carried lines grief had carved permanently. "I'm sorry," Sarah said quickly. "That was cruel." "It was honest." Delilah kept her eyes on the dust. Closer now. Individual riders forming from the haze. "What do you want me to say, that I'm a fool? That the whole town's right about the Boston woman who can't face reality?" "I want you to say you deserve more than waiting." The lead rider separated from the group. "Brown horse, too tall. Wrong man. Always the wrong man." "Miss Warren." The rider stopped, hat in hand. Trail dust caked everything, his clothes, his dark hair, the exhaustion in his face. "Forgive the intrusion. I need the Miller farm. We have a situation." "That's us." Sarah stepped forward. "What situation?" His jaw worked. "Found a boy on the trail. 7, maybe 8. His mother died 2 days back. Fever took her fast. He won't speak, won't tell us his name. Trail boss said you might..." He stopped. The request hung unfinished. Sarah's face shifted through too many emotions. "Bring him." Another rider approached, leading a pinto with a small figure slumped in the saddle. The boy's arms wrapped around himself. His eyes stared at nothing. Tear tracks cut through the dirt on his face, but he made no sound. "Sweet boy." Sarah reached up. The child flinched hard against the saddle horn. "He won't let anyone touch him," the cowboy said. "We've tried everything." Delilah moved without thinking. Classroom instinct, maybe, or recognizing something in that hollow stare. She knew that look. She saw it in her mirror some mornings. "What's your horse's name?" The boy's eyes flickered, just for a second. "He's handsome. I bet he's fast." She kept her voice soft. "My student Emma has a pinto. She says they're the smartest horses. Is that true?" The smallest movement, his hand shifted on the reins. "I'm Miss Warren. I teach at the school here. We have 9 students, all different ages. One of them lost his mother last year too. Stopped talking for 3 months. She wasn't sure if this was right, but continued. His voice came back when he realized nobody would make him forget her. The boy's chin trembled. Nobody here wants you to forget your mama. We just want to keep you safe while you miss her. Would that be all right? Long seconds passed. Then slowly, carefully, the boy swung his leg over and slid down. He didn't reach for anyone, stood alone, small and shaking, but he dismounted. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. She looked at her husband, who'd appeared from the farm. Something silent passed between them. "We'll care for him." The cowboy exhaled. "Trail boss will want to leave payment." "We don't take payment for helping children." Sarah's voice went iron. "But we need supplies. Miss Warren, would you walk to the store with this gentleman while we settle the boy?" It wasn't a question. Give the child space to break without strangers watching. Of course. They walked in silence, the cowboy leading his horse. He moved comfortable with quiet, not rushing to fill empty air. "That was good," he said finally. "With the boy. I teach. Hurt children need gentleness. Most people don't know the difference." He glanced over. "I'm Daniel Ross, foreman for the Morrison Drive. We're nearly done heading to Cheyenne Rail Station after this." Delilah Warren. "The teacher. Sarah mentioned you." He adjusted his hat. "She speaks highly." "Sarah's kind to everyone. There's a difference between kindness and respect. She gives you the latter." Delilah didn't know what to do with that, so she changed subjects. "The boy's mother, did she suffer?" "No. Fever came at dawn, gone by sunset. She tried to tell us about him, but—" His voice roughened. "Sometimes death moves too fast for goodbyes." At the store, Delilah helped gather what Sarah needed. Daniel paid for everything despite protests. "The drive owes him that," he said firmly. "We should have noticed she was sick sooner." "You can't blame yourself for illness." "Can't I?" Something dark crossed his face. "Seems there's plenty we should notice that we miss." Jeremiah wrapped the supplies, glancing between them. Delilah could already hear the whispers this would spawn. Let them talk. She'd stopped caring 3 years ago. "Miss Warren." Daniel's voice stopped her at the door. "Can I ask what keeps you at that fence post? Sarah said you stand there most evenings." Direct. Most people danced around it. "A promise. To someone, to myself, that waiting wouldn't poison me, that I wouldn't become bitter." The words came easier than expected. "The fence post reminds me that hope and foolishness look identical sometimes, but I choose which one I practice." Daniel studied her, and she felt truly seen for the first time since Samuel left. "That's not foolishness," he said quietly. "That's faith." "What's the difference?" "Faith admits it might be wrong, but believes anyway. Foolishness refuses to see truth." He shifted the supplies. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're practicing either. I think you're surviving how you know how. There's honor in that." Something cracked in Delilah's chest. She nodded and left before her eyes could betray her. 3 weeks changed everything. Daniel's drive stayed camped outside town. Trail boss said the cattle needed rest before the final push, which meant Daniel Ross kept appearing in Clearwater, always with legitimate errands, but always finding his way to wherever Delilah happened to be. He fixed the schoolhouse steps the town council had been promising to repair for months. He brought the boy Thomas, they'd learned his name, to sit quietly in the back during lessons. He rode with her to the Miller farm when Sarah needed harvest help. "You're not subtle," Delilah told him one afternoon. He'd appeared at the fence post again. Wasn't trying to be. "The town's talking. Towns always talk." He stopped beside her, following her gaze. "Sarah told me about Samuel Donovan." Delilah's spine went rigid. "Did she?" "Don't be angry. She's worried." "Everyone's worried. Everyone knows what's best for my life better than I do." She gripped the fence harder. "Let me guess you're here to tell me to give up too." "No." Something weighted his voice. I'm here to tell you loyalty like yours is rare. Most people quit the moment things get hard. You've held on 5 years. That means something. It means I'm stubborn and delusional. It means you keep your word." He paused. "My father said the measure of a person isn't what they do when everything's easy. It's what they do when every voice says, 'Quit,' but something deeper says, 'Stay.'" Delilah finally looked at him. Really looked. Kind eyes that had seen hard things but hadn't turned cruel. Lines suggesting he smiled more than frowned, though he seemed careful about when he offered those smiles. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Because I know what it's like to carry something you can't put down." He met her gaze steady. "And because these 3 weeks I've watched you teach children who adore you, help a grieving boy find his voice, and stand here every evening choosing hope over bitterness. That kind of strength shouldn't be dismissed." "Daniel, I'm not Samuel. I'm not here to replace him or convince you to stop waiting." He struggled. "I'm just saying that while you wait, you're still living, and how you live matters." The next morning, Delilah found Thomas at her desk before school started. "Miss Warren, can I ask something?" "Of course." "Why do you stand at the fence every day?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm waiting for someone." "Someone who left?" "Someone who promised to come back." Thomas considered this with the seriousness only children possess. "My mama promised we'd have a house someday. She died before we got one." His small hand touched her desk. "Mr. Ross said dead people don't leave us empty. They leave us full of what they gave us while they lived. Maybe your person did that too, even if they haven't come back yet." He walked away to join the other children. Delilah sat frozen, his words echoing. The cattle drive left on a Tuesday. Delilah stood at the fence watching them disappear toward Cheyenne. Daniel tipped his hat from a distance, not presuming closeness, but his eyes held questions she couldn't answer yet. That evening, Jeremiah handed her a letter at the post office. Came with the afternoon stage. No return address. Her hands shook. The handwriting wasn't Samuel's, she'd memorized every curve and angle years ago, but her heart hammered anyway as she tore it open. "Miss Warren, I debated giving you this for 3 weeks. Decided you deserved truth more than I deserved the comfort of silence. 4 years ago, I worked a mining claim outside Denver with a man named Samuel Donovan. Good man. Talked about you constantly. About the land he'd buy, the home he'd build, how you deserved better than a soldier's uncertain future. There was a collapse. 6 men went down. Sam was one. I'm sorry. I know those words don't bring him back or undo 5 years of waiting. But I couldn't leave a town knowing you stood at that fence believing he chose silence. He didn't choose it. Death chose for him. His last words were your name. Daniel Ross." The letter fell. She didn't remember walking to the fence post. Didn't remember her knees hitting dirt she'd stood above for 5 years. Didn't remember the sound that tore from her throat. Grief, relief, rage at a universe that had let her hope for something already gone. Samuel was dead. Dead for 4 years while she wrote letters into silence. The fence post caught her weight as she broke. And somewhere in the breaking, something else broke free: anger. She'd been too loyal to feel exhaustion from maintaining faith against impossible odds, the suffocating weight of promises made to ghosts. Sarah found her after dark, pulled her up, held her through sobs without trying to fix anything. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry." "He never left me," Delilah gasped between words. "He didn't choose to stay away. No, he didn't. I've been waiting for a dead man. You've been keeping faith with someone you loved. That's not the same." But it felt the same. 5 years poured into an empty vessel. Hope transformed to humiliation. Every whispered judgment proven right. She'd been waiting for nothing. Morning came without mercy. Delilah taught mechanically, calling on students and correcting slates while feeling disconnected from her own body. The children sensed something wrong they always did and behaved with unusual quiet. During afternoon recess, Thomas approached. "Miss Warren?" She looked up, forcing a smile. "Yes?" "Are you sad because someone died?" "Yes." "Was it someone you loved?" "Very much." "Then they're not really gone." Thomas said it with such certainty. "Mr. Ross told me that. He said the people we love leave pieces of themselves in us, and those pieces never die. They just become part of who we are." He walked away, leaving Delilah staring after him. That evening she opened her writing desk at home. Inside were copies of every letter she'd sent Samuel, proof she'd honored her promise. She read through them, watching her own voice change from passionate girl to uncertain woman to someone clinging to faith because letting go felt like betrayal. The last letter sat on top, sent 3 weeks ago. "Dearest Samuel, another drive came through today. I watched the riders less desperately than before. Perhaps hope is giving way to acceptance, though I'm not sure what I'm accepting. I still believe you'll come back. But I'm starting to understand belief and certainty are different things. Maybe faith lives in the space between. The fence post still stands. I still wait, but I'm waiting differently now. Yours, Delilah." She'd known. Some part of her had been saying goodbye without admitting it. Now she took fresh paper and wrote one final letter. Not to Samuel, to herself. "Dear Delilah, you kept your promise. You can stop now. The man you loved didn't abandon you. That doesn't make 5 years wasted. It makes them testament to love worth having. You survived the waiting. Now survive the knowing. Start living for who you are, not who you promised to become." She sealed it without a name and placed it with the others, then walked to the fence post one last time. Evening air bit cold. Winter coming. She placed both palms on weathered wood, feeling every splinter, remembering every evening spent hoping for hoofbeats that never came. "Goodbye, Samuel." Her voice barely carried. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry you died alone in the dark. I'm sorry for every dream we didn't get to build." Wind took her words across open land. "And I'm sorry I have to let you go now." The grief sat heavy but cleaner. A wound properly dressed instead of festering under false hope. When she walked back to town, she didn't look over her shoulder. It was time to face forward. She didn't know that 8 weeks later a rider would return from Cheyenne. And this time, he wouldn't be passing through. 8 weeks felt like 8 years. Delilah threw herself into teaching with an intensity that worried Sarah. She arrived at the schoolhouse before dawn, stayed until the last light faded. Lesson plans that used to take an hour now consumed entire evenings. She reorganized the classroom twice, built new shelves for books the town didn't have, created a lending library from her own collection. Anything to avoid the silence of her room. Anything to avoid thinking about the fence post she no longer visited. "You're going to work yourself into the ground," Sarah said one afternoon, finding Delilah scrubbing classroom floors that didn't need scrubbing. "I'm fine." "You're not sleeping." "I sleep enough." "Delilah." Sarah took the brush from her hands. "Grieving doesn't mean destroying yourself." "I'm not grieving. I'm just—" The words caught. "I don't know what I'm doing." "You're trying to fill the space he left, but you can't scrub away 5 years of hoping." Delilah sat back on her heels, soap suds dripping from her hands. "I feel like a fool. Everyone was right about me. Everyone was wrong about you." Sarah's voice went fierce. "You loved someone deeply enough to wait 5 years. That's not foolishness. That's the kind of heart most people wish they had. It's the kind of heart that gets broken. All hearts get broken eventually. Yours just did it while staying faithful to something beautiful." Sarah pulled her up. "Come to dinner tonight. Thomas has been asking about you." The boy had attached himself to Delilah in the weeks since Daniel left. He stayed after school most days, helping clean slates and organize books. He didn't talk much, but his presence felt like companionship rather than obligation. At dinner that evening, Thomas sat beside her and ate with the careful manners someone had taught him recently. "Mr. Miller's teaching me to read better," he said between bites, "so I can read the books you lent me." "That's wonderful, Thomas." "He says reading is how we visit places we've never been and meet people who aren't here anymore." Thomas looked at her with those two old eyes. "Is that how you talk to the person who died, by reading old letters?" The table went quiet. Sarah's fork stopped midway to her mouth. "Sometimes," Delilah managed, "sometimes I read them and remember who he was. Does it help? I don't know yet." Thomas considered this. "Mr. Ross writes me letters. From Cheyenne. He says writing helps him think clearly about things that are confusing." Delilah's chest tightened. "That's kind of him." "He asks about you in every letter." Thomas said it casually, reaching for more bread. "Wants to know if you're still teaching, if the schoolhouse steps are holding up, if you're okay." Sarah shot her husband a look that clearly said, "Did you know about this?" "What do you tell him?" Delilah heard herself ask. "The truth. That you seem sad, but you're trying not to be. That you don't go to the fence post anymore. That you work really hard and help everyone, but maybe don't help yourself enough." Out of the mouths of children, Delilah felt exposed, seen in ways she hadn't intended. "When did he last write?" The question slipped out. 3 days ago. He said the ranch work is good, but he misses Wyoming. Mrs. Thomas trailed off, suddenly shy. "Mrs. what?" He didn't finish that sentence. Just said Mrs. Wyoming and then started talking about horses. After dinner, walking home under stars that felt too bright and too many. Delilah let herself think about Daniel Ross for the first time since reading his letter. She'd been so consumed by grief over Samuel that she hadn't processed what Daniel's confession meant. He'd known. For 3 weeks he'd known the truth and carried it, watching her stand at that fence, trying to find the right moment to break her heart gently. Part of her felt betrayed by the delay. Another part understood the impossible position he'd been in, tell her immediately and shatter someone he barely knew, or wait until he knew her well enough to gauge how she'd handle it. He'd chosen to know her first. There was something almost unbearably kind about that. The thought followed her into restless sleep and stayed through the next day's lessons. She found herself wondering what Cheyenne was like, what ranch work Daniel was doing, whether he thought about Clearwater at all, beyond his letters to Thomas. Whether he thought about her. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You just finished mourning one man. Don't be foolish enough to start hoping for another." But the thought had planted itself, and thoughts like that didn't uproot easily. 2 weeks later, the first snow came. Delilah stood at her classroom window watching fat flakes drift down, thinking about winter in Boston, about the last winter she'd spent with Samuel before the war took him away. They'd walked through snow-covered commons, his hand warm in hers, making promises about spring. Spring had come and gone 13 times since then. "Miss Warren." Thomas stood at her elbow. "Are you crying?" She touched her face, surprised to find it wet. "Just remembering something." Something sad. Something that used to be happy before it became sad. "Mr. Ross says that's the hardest kind of remembering." Thomas handed her his handkerchief, a child's gesture that nearly broke her. "He says sometimes we have to remember the happy parts extra hard so they don't disappear under the sad parts. He's very wise. He's very lonely." Thomas said it matter-of-factly. "He doesn't say so, but I can tell. His letters sound like how I felt after Mama died, like he's going through motions but not really living." Delilah knelt down to Thomas's eye level. "Why are you telling me this?" The boy's face scrunched up, thinking hard. "Because you sound the same way sometimes, like you're here but not really here, and I thought maybe—" He stopped, suddenly uncertain. "Maybe what?" "Maybe if two people are lonely for the same reasons, they could be less lonely together." The simple logic of it stunned her. Before she could respond, Thomas grabbed his coat and ran out to join the other children in the snow. That evening, Delilah did something she'd sworn she wouldn't do. She took out fresh paper and began to write. "Mr. Ross Thomas tells me you write him regularly. That's kind of you. He needs steadiness right now, and you provide it even from a distance. I've been trying to write this letter for 2 weeks and keep stopping, not because I don't know what to say, but because I know too much and don't know where to start. Thank you for telling me about Samuel. Thank you for carrying that burden for 3 weeks while I stood at a fence waiting for a ghost. Thank you for being kind enough to know me before breaking my heart. I was angry at first. Angry that you didn't tell me immediately, angry that you watched me hope for something impossible. But I understand now what you did. You gave me kindness when you could have given me just truth. I'm not waiting anymore." I said goodbye to the fence post and to the man I loved. It hurt worse than I expected and less than I feared. Grief is strange that way. Thomas says you miss Wyoming. I hope Cheyenne is treating you well. I hope the ranch work is fulfilling. I hope. She stopped, pen hovering over paper. What did she hope? That he was happy, that he thought of her, that the 3 weeks they'd known each other had meant something beyond circumstance. She crumpled the letter and threw it in the fireplace. Too much, too presumptuous. He'd been kind to a broken woman, nothing more. But she pulled out fresh paper and started again. "Mr. Ross Thomas speaks highly of you. Thank you for writing him. Thank you for telling me the truth about Samuel. The schoolhouse steps are holding up well. Sincerely, Delilah Warren." She sealed it before she could second-guess herself and mailed it the next morning. His response came 10 days later. "Miss Warren, glad to hear the steps are solid. I worried about them. I worried about you too. Still do. Thomas tells me you're working hard. I hope you're also resting. Cheyenne is fine. The work is fine. Everything is fine except it isn't, and I'm not sure how to explain that in a letter without sounding ungrateful for employment. I think about Clearwater often, about the schoolhouse and the Millers and Thomas. I think about our conversations at the fence post. I think about how strong you were even when you were breaking. I'm not good with words on paper. What I'm trying to say is, I'm glad you're not waiting anymore. You deserve to live, not just endure." Daniel Ross. Delilah read it 3 times, parsing every word for meaning beneath meaning. "I think about Clearwater often. Not the town. The people. Her." She wrote back, "Mr. Ross, you're better with words than you think. I'm trying to live instead of endure. Some days are easier than others. Teaching helps. Thomas helps. Knowing the truth helps, even though it hurt. What would you be doing if everything wasn't just fine?" Delilah. She'd dropped the formality. It felt like stepping off a cliff. His next letter came faster. "Delilah. If everything wasn't just fine, I'd be back in Wyoming. I took this job because it paid well, and I needed to save money. But saving money for a future you're not sure you want feels empty. I keep thinking about what you said at the fence post. About choosing hope over bitterness, about faith versus foolishness. I've been foolish about a lot of things. Maybe I'm being foolish now, writing letters to someone who probably doesn't think about me the way I think about her. There's a ranch foreman position opening up near Clearwater in spring. The pay is less, but the work is better. I'm considering it. If I came back, would that be presumptuous? Would it make things harder for you? Daniel." Delilah's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the paper. He was asking permission, asking if she wanted him to come back, asking if 3 weeks of knowing each other had meant something beyond kindness to a grieving woman. She sat at her desk for an hour, trying to write a response that was honest without being desperate, encouraging without being forward. Finally, she wrote Daniel. It wouldn't be presumptuous. It would be welcome. Come home. Delilah. She mailed it before fear could stop her. 3 weeks of silence followed. 3 weeks where she checked the post office daily, where she second-guessed every word, where she convinced herself she'd been too forward and scared him away. Then Thomas came running into the schoolhouse one Friday afternoon, face flushed with cold and excitement. Miss Warren, Mr. Ross is back. He just rode into town. Her heart stopped, started, stumbled over itself. He's looking for you. Thomas continued breathlessly. He went to your boarding house, but Mrs. Henderson said you were here, and... The schoolhouse door opened. Daniel stood in the doorway, hat in hand, snow dusting his shoulders. He looked thinner than she remembered, tired from travel, but his eyes held the same kindness they'd held 3 months ago. Miss Warren. His voice was rough. I hope this isn't a bad time. Every child in the classroom had turned to stare. Delilah felt her face flush. Class dismissed early today, she managed. Thomas, please help the younger children with their coats. Chaos erupted as 9 children scrambled for coats and books, whispering and giggling. Thomas winked at her, actually winked as he shepherded them out. Then, she and Daniel were alone. You came back, she said stupidly. You told me to. He stepped inside, closing the door against the cold. Was that just politeness? Because I can leave if... Don't. The word came out too fast, too desperate. Don't leave. He exhaled, tension draining from his shoulders. I got the foreman position. Start Monday. It's the Jacobson Ranch about 6 miles north of town. That's wonderful. Delilah. He moved closer. I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Her heart hammered. All right. I've thought about you every day since I left. Every single day. I know that sounds impossible after only knowing you 3 weeks, but it's true. I've never met anyone who held on to faith the way you did, who could be breaking and still help a grieving child, who could face the worst truth and come out the other side still capable of kindness. He was directly in front of her now, close enough that she could see snow melting in his dark hair. I carried Samuel's death for 4 years, he continued. Felt guilty about surviving when he didn't. When I met you and realized you were the woman he'd talked about constantly, I didn't know what to do. Tell you immediately and shatter someone I didn't know, or wait and hope I could find a way to ease the blow. You chose kindness, Delilah whispered. I chose to know you first, and in those 3 weeks, I fell. He stopped, jaw working. I fell for you. The way you teach, the way you hope, the way you endure. When I left, I told myself it was for the best, that you needed time to grieve, that I had no right to your heart when you'd just learned about losing his. Daniel. Let me finish. His hands clenched the hat brim. Then I got your letters. Short, careful letters that told me you were thinking about me too. And when you wrote, "Come home," I knew I had to take the chance. Even if I'm wrong. Even if you only meant it as friendly encouragement. I had to try. He took a shaky breath. I'm not Samuel. I can't replace what you lost. But if you'd give me the chance, if you'd let me try, I'd spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing to hope again. The classroom fell silent except for wind against windows and the hammering of her heart. I don't want you to be Samuel, Delilah said finally. I loved him. I'll always love what we had. But he's gone and I'm still here, and you're right that I chose to hope again. I chose it when I told you to come home. She stepped closer, closing the last distance between them. I've thought about you every day too. Tried not to because it felt too soon, too disloyal. But grief and new feelings aren't mutually exclusive. I can mourn what I lost and still be terrified and hopeful about what I might find. His free hand lifted slowly, carefully, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his palm cupped her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. I won't hurt you, he said roughly. I swear I won't. You can't promise that. Life hurts people. All we can promise is to be honest when it does. Then I promise honesty. Always. Then I promise the same. He kissed her forehead feather light, like she was something precious and breakable. She wasn't sure if she was crying or laughing or both. This is crazy, she whispered against his shoulder. We barely know each other. Then let's take our time knowing each other properly. The whole town will talk. Let them. They'll say I moved on too fast from Samuel. They don't know your heart. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Only you know when you're ready. Only you know what you need. And somehow impossibly, that was exactly what she needed to hear. They stood there in the schoolhouse as snow fell outside, not kissing, not making promises they weren't ready for, just holding on to something new and fragile and real. Dinner, Daniel said eventually. Let me take you to dinner, properly, with the whole town watching, so they know my intentions are honorable. Delilah laughed, the sound surprising her. Your intentions to court the town spinster. My intentions to court the strongest woman I've ever met. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. If she'll have me. She will. They walked to the boarding house together so she could change a practical decision that felt momentous. Mrs. Henderson answered the door and nearly fainted when she saw Daniel. Mr. Ross. We heard you were back in town. Yes, ma'am. I'm hoping to take Miss Warren to dinner if that's acceptable. Mrs. Henderson looked between them, reading volumes in the careful space they maintained. I see. Well, yes, of course. Delilah, dear, take your time getting ready. Upstairs, Delilah stared at her reflection and tried to process what had just happened. Daniel had come back. He'd confessed feelings she'd been too afraid to name in herself. He wanted to court her properly publicly with honorable intentions, and she'd said yes. She changed into her better dress, dark blue wool that brought out her eyes and pinned her hair with more care than usual. When she came downstairs, Daniel was waiting in the parlor, looking nervous as a schoolboy. You look beautiful, he said. You look terrified. Little bit. He offered his arm. Ready to face the firing squad. The hotel dining room fell silent when they entered. Every head turned. Delilah felt the weight of judgment, speculation, and scandal crashing down. Then Sarah Miller stood up from a corner table. Daniel Ross, about time you came to your senses. She crossed the room and hugged him hard enough to make him grunt. Sit with us, you and Delilah both. The spell broke. Conversation resumed, though glances kept sliding their way. At the Millers' table, Thomas bounced in his seat. I told you he was coming back. You did. Delilah agreed, fighting a smile. And I told you that you could be less lonely together. Thomas, Sarah warned gently. What, I was right? Mr. Miller chuckled. Boy's got a point. Over roast beef and potatoes, Daniel told them about Cheyenne, the work, the city, the restlessness that had followed him everywhere. Delilah talked about the school, the students, the library she'd started. Under the table, Daniel's hand found hers. She let it stay there, warm and solid and real. When they left, the Millers walked with them toward the boarding house, providing chaperone and shield against gossip. Tomorrow, Daniel said at her door, still holding her hand. Can I see you tomorrow? Church in the morning. Then I'm free. Church then. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. And every day after that, if you'll let me. Every day might be excessive. I've got 5 months of every days to make up for. 3 months. Felt like 5. She laughed and squeezed his hand before going inside. Through her window, she watched him walk away with the Millers. Thomas skipping between them, and felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope that didn't hurt. Sunday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of winter day that made Wyoming feel both brutal and beautiful. Delilah dressed with shaking hands, choosing her gray wool dress with the burgundy trim, practical but pretty. She told herself the extra care with her hair had nothing to do with Daniel Ross sitting 3 pews behind her family's usual spot. Except it had everything to do with him. The church was packed, everyone suddenly devout now that scandal was brewing. Delilah felt eyes tracking her entrance, heard the whispers that tried and failed to be subtle. She kept her chin up and slid into her pew beside Mrs. Henderson. Daniel arrived 5 minutes later with the Millers and Thomas. He wore a clean shirt and jacket, his hair still damp from washing. When he caught her eye, he smiled small and private just for her. Reverend Halloway's sermon was about patience and God's timing. Delilah tried to focus on his words instead of the weight of Daniel's presence behind her. The awareness that prickled along her spine, the way her heart had developed an inconvenient habit of racing whenever he was near. After the service, the congregation spilled onto the church steps. Daniel was beside her immediately, offering his arm with a formality that was both old-fashioned and deliberate. "Miss Warren, would you do me the honor of a walk?" Every nearby conversation stopped. Delilah felt the pressure of expectation, the town holding its collective breath. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Ross." They walked toward the edge of town, Thomas trailing behind them, like an enthusiastic chaperone. The boy chattered about the miller's new calf, about school, about everything except the obvious tension between the two adults. "Thomas," Daniel said, eventually fishing coins from his pocket, "would you mind running to the general store? I promised Mrs. Miller I'd get peppermints for after Sunday dinner." The boy's eyes went wide. "Really? You're giving me money for candy?" "For Mrs. Miller's candy. Though if one or two happen to disappear before you get back, I won't ask questions." Thomas grabbed the coins and ran, leaving them alone. "Subtle," Delilah said. "I'm not feeling particularly subtle today." Daniel guided her toward a bench near the schoolhouse, away from prying eyes. "I barely heard a word of that sermon. Too busy thinking about you sitting 3 rows ahead." "I didn't hear much either. No. I was too aware of you sitting 3 rows behind." He laughed, the sound warm and surprised. "We're in trouble, aren't we?" "Depends on your definition of trouble." They sat proper distance between them, aware that someone was probably watching from somewhere. In Clearwater, someone was always watching. "I need to ask you something," Daniel said, his tone shifting serious. "And I need you to be honest with me, even if you think it'll hurt my feelings." Delilah's stomach tightened. "All right. Are you doing this because you actually want to, or because I came back and you feel obligated? Because you're kind enough that you'd force yourself through a courtship just to spare my feelings, and I need to know that's not what this is." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. "You think I'd let you court me out of pity? I think you're loyal to a fault and kind to everyone, and I want to make sure you're not confusing gratitude with something else." Delilah turned to face him fully. "I'm not confused. I'm terrified, but I'm not confused." "Terrified of what?" "Of how fast this is happening. Of what people will say. Of whether I'm ready or just pretending to be ready, because the alternative is being alone forever." She took a breath. "But mostly I'm terrified that you'll realize I'm not worth the effort you're putting in." "Delilah, let me finish. I spent 5 years waiting for a dead man. 5 years that everyone told me was foolish. And they were right, even if their reasons were wrong. I wasted time I'll never get back. So when you look at me like I'm something special, part of me thinks you just haven't figured out yet that I'm the woman who stood at a fence writing letters to silence." Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I'm not sure I do." "Too bad. You're hearing it anyway." He shifted to face her close enough that she could see the amber flecks in his brown eyes. "I see someone who kept a promise when it would have been easier to break it. Someone who helped a grieving child when she was drowning in her own grief. Someone who runs a school single-handedly and builds libraries and teaches children that the world can be kind." He reached for her hand, hesitated, then took it anyway. "I see someone strong enough to love deeply and gentle enough to let go when she had to. I see someone worth crossing state lines for, worth taking a lower-paying job, for worth risking rejection for." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "So no, I haven't figured out some hidden flaw that'll make me run. I've figured out that you're exactly who I hoped you were, and that scares me too." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've never felt this way before. Because I'm 30 years old, and I've spent most of my life moving from job to job, place to place, never putting down roots. Because settling down felt impossible until I met you. And now it feels like the only thing that makes sense." Delilah's throat tightened. "That's a lot of pressure to put on 3 weeks of knowing each other." "Then let's take the pressure off. Let's just see what happens. No expectations, no timeline, no promises we're not ready to make." He squeezed her hand. "Just two people getting to know each other and hoping it leads somewhere good." "I can do that." "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." Thomas came running back, pockets bulging with peppermints, his mouth suspiciously sticky. "Mrs. Miller says dinner's in an hour, and you're both invited." They spent the afternoon at the Miller farm, the kind of easy Sunday that felt both ordinary and significant. Daniel helped Mr. Miller with barn repairs while Delilah and Sarah prepared dinner. Thomas bounced between both groups, too excited to settle anywhere. "He's good with the boy," Sarah observed, watching through the window as Daniel showed Thomas how to properly hammer a nail. "He is. He's good with you too." Delilah's hand stilled on the potato she was peeling. "It's too soon, isn't it? Samuel's only been gone. I've only known he was gone for 2 months. There's no timeline for grief, or for healing." Sarah joined her at the counter. "And Samuel wasn't gone 2 months ago. He was gone 4 years ago. You just didn't know it yet. The town always thinks something. Let them." Sarah's hand covered hers. "You spent 5 years living for someone else's promise. Maybe it's time to live for yourself." Dinner was loud and warm, Thomas chattering about school while Mr. Miller told stories about cattle drives he'd worked in his youth. Daniel listened more than he talked, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and kind. After the meal, they all bundled up for a walk to check on the Millers' livestock. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Thomas ran ahead with Mr. Miller, leaving Delilah and Daniel walking with Sarah. "I'll check on the chickens," Sarah announced suddenly, peeling off toward the coop, with all the subtlety of a woman determined to give them privacy. "She's not subtle either," Delilah murmured. "No one in this town is." Daniel slowed his pace. "Do you mind?" "Mind what?" "That everyone's watching. That this is happening publicly. Some women would hate that." "I spent 5 years being watched and whispered about. This is better gossip, at least." "Better gossip?" "The school teacher who found love again is more romantic than the spinster who wouldn't give up on a ghost." Daniel stopped walking. "Is that what this is? Love?" The word hung between them, too big and too soon, and somehow exactly right. "I don't know yet," Delilah admitted. "But it could be, if we let it." "Then let's let it." He kissed her, then soft and careful, his cold hands cupping her face like she was something precious. She let herself sink into it, let herself feel wanted and chosen and possible. When they broke apart, Thomas was whooping from somewhere near the barn. I saw that I'm telling everyone." "Thomas!" Sarah's scandalized voice carried across the farmyard. Daniel groaned, but he was smiling. "We're never going to hear the end of this." "No," Delilah agreed, unable to stop her own smile. "We're really not." The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt like building something real. Daniel worked at the Jacobson ranch during the day, but his evenings belonged to Delilah. He'd ride into town after work, sometimes stopping at the schoolhouse to walk her home, sometimes meeting her at the boarding house for supervised visits in Mrs. Henderson's parlor. They talked about everything: his childhood in Missouri, her years in Boston, the paths that had led them both to Wyoming. He told her about the mining accident, about holding Samuel's hand as he died, about promising to find the woman Sam had loved and tell her the truth. "I never expected to fall for you," he admitted one evening, sitting across from each other in the parlor while Mrs. Henderson knitted loudly in the corner. "I came to Clearwater planning to deliver the news and leave. But then I saw you at that fence post and something just—" He trailed off. "Just what?" "Just broke open inside me, like I'd been locked up tight for years, and suddenly I could breathe again." Delilah reached across the appropriate distance between them and took his hand. Mrs. Henderson's knitting needles clicked faster. "I never expected to feel anything again," she said quietly. "After I read your letter, I thought I was done. Done hoping, done dreaming, done believing good things could happen. Then you came back and everything shifted." "Shifted how?" "Like the world tilted just enough that I could see new possibilities. Like maybe the story wasn't over, just changing chapters." "I like that," Daniel said. Changing chapters. Not erasing what came before, just adding what comes next. They went to church together every Sunday. He came to the school and helped repair things that needed fixing. She attended a barn dance at the Jacobson Ranch and met his boss, who praised Daniel's work ethic and reliability. They went on chaperoned walks and supervised dinners and carefully proper visits that frustrated them both. "I want to kiss you again," Daniel said one evening, walking her home after dinner at the hotel. "Mrs. Henderson is watching from the window." "I know. That's why I'm telling you instead of doing it." "Very proper of you." "I'm trying to court you correctly. Do things right. But it's killing me moving this slowly." Delilah glanced at the boarding house window, where Mrs. Henderson's silhouette was clearly visible. "Walk me around back, to the kitchen entrance." "Delilah, just trust me." They circled the building out of sight from the parlor window. The moment they were hidden, Daniel pulled her close and kissed her properly, deep and hungry, and nothing like the careful pecks they'd managed under supervision. "We're going to scandalize the whole town," she gasped when they broke apart. "Worth it." He kissed her again, softer this time. "God, you're worth everything." They managed to behave for another 3 weeks before Mrs. Henderson caught them kissing in the kitchen. She lectured them both about propriety and reputation, then winked at Delilah later and said, "About time that man showed some passion." February arrived with a blizzard that shut down the town for 4 days. School was canceled, work was impossible, and everyone hunkered down, waiting for the storm to pass. Delilah was trapped in the boarding house, going stir-crazy without her students or her routine or any way to see Daniel. On the 3rd day, someone knocked at the boarding house door. Mrs. Henderson opened it to find Daniel standing there, covered in snow, half frozen, holding a package wrapped in oilcloth. "Mr. Ross, are you insane? You could have died out there." "Had to check on Delilah, make sure she was safe." His teeth chattered hard enough to click together. Mrs. Henderson dragged him inside, scolding the entire time. "Safe? She's perfectly safe. You're the one who nearly froze to death for no good reason." "It's a good reason." He spotted Delilah on the stairs, and his face transformed. "Hi." "Hi." She couldn't decide whether to kiss him or kill him. "You idiot. You beautiful, stupid, ridiculous idiot. Brought you something." He held out the package with shaking hands. "Been working on it for weeks." Inside was a book, hand-bound, the pages covered in careful writing. Delilah opened it slowly and realized what she was holding. Stories. Dozens of them. Stories about Wyoming and ranch life and cattle drives, written in Daniel's neat script. Stories for her students, for her classroom library, for the children who had so few books. "You wrote these?" Her voice came out strangled. "I'm not much of a writer, but I thought the kids might like real stories about the West, about cowboys and ranches and how things actually work out here. And I thought—" He stopped suddenly, shy. "I thought maybe you could read them. Tell me if they're any good." Delilah looked at this man who'd ridden through a blizzard just to check on her, who'd spent weeks writing stories for children he barely knew, who looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. "Marry me," she said. The parlor went silent. Mrs. Henderson's mouth fell open. Daniel stared at her like he'd misheard. "What?" "Marry me. I know it's fast, and I know people will talk, and I know we're supposed to wait longer, but I don't want to wait. I've waited 5 years for something that was already gone. I don't want to waste another minute waiting when I know what I want." "Delilah, you came back. You wrote me letters and courted me properly and made me believe in possibilities again. You wrote stories for my students. You rode through a blizzard just to make sure I was safe." She set the book down carefully and moved toward him. "So marry me. Please." Daniel's hands came up to frame her face, cold and shaking and perfect. "You're supposed to let me do this part. Do you want to do this part? More than anything. Then ask me properly." He dropped to one knee right there in Mrs. Henderson's parlor, still dripping snow, still half frozen, still the most beautiful thing Delilah had ever seen. "Delilah Warren, you're the strongest, kindest, most stubborn woman I've ever met. You make me want to be better. You make me want to build something lasting. You make me believe in things I thought I'd never have." His voice cracked. "Will you marry me?" "Yes." "I don't have a ring yet." "I don't care about a ring. We should probably wait until spring." "We're not waiting until spring. Delilah." "Daniel Ross." I said yes. "Stop arguing with me and kiss me." So he did, right there in front of Mrs. Henderson, who clutched her chest and declared she'd never seen anything so romantic and improper in all her days. They were married 3 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon in late February. The church was packed, the whole town turning out to witness the schoolteacher and the cowboy, who'd found each other against impossible odds. Thomas served as ring-bearer, so proud in his new suit that he walked with careful precision down the aisle. Sarah cried through the entire ceremony. Mr. Miller pretended he had something in his eye. Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her face with a handkerchief and whispered to everyone nearby that she'd seen this coming from the moment Daniel showed up at her door. Reverend Halloway kept the service simple. "Do you, Daniel Ross, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold in sickness and health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Daniel's voice was steady, his hand warm in hers. "And do you? Delilah Warren, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" Delilah looked at the man standing before her, kind-eyed and steady and real. She thought about the fence post, about 5 years of waiting, about the moment she'd decided to stop waiting and start living. "I do." When Daniel kissed her, the church erupted in applause. Thomas whooped. Someone in the back whistled, and Delilah felt something shift inside her, a final letting go of what had been, a full embrace of what was becoming. The reception was held at the hotel tables, crowded with food and friends, and enough warmth to chase away the February cold. Daniel never left her side, his hand at the small of her back, his attention completely focused on her. "Happy," he murmured during a quiet moment. "Terrified." "Me too. Good terrified or bad terrified. The best kind, the kind where everything's changing and you don't know what comes next, but you can't wait to find out." They danced badly. Neither of them had much experience, but it didn't matter. They stumbled through a waltz while the town watched and whispered and ultimately smiled, because even the biggest skeptics had to admit they looked happy. Near the end of the evening, Sarah pulled Delilah aside. "I have something for you." She handed over a small package. "Don't open it until you're alone." Later in the room Daniel had rented for their wedding night, Delilah unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a letter yellowed with age, written in handwriting she recognized immediately. Samuel's handwriting. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. "What is it?" Daniel asked, coming to stand behind her. "A letter. From Samuel. I don't understand. Sarah said she didn't have anything of his." "Maybe you should read it." The letter was dated 3 days before the mining accident. "My dearest Delilah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and someone who loved me found a way to give you closure I couldn't give myself. I've been in Colorado for 2 years now, working claims and saving money. I keep telling myself it's almost enough, that soon I'll have what I need to build the life I promised you. But the truth is, it's never enough. There's always one more season, one more strike, one more reason to delay. I think about you every day. about the life we planned, the home we'll build, the children we'll have. But I'm starting to wonder if I'm chasing a dream that was never realistic. You deserve better than a man who can't stop chasing the next big find. If something happens to me and mining is dangerous work, we both know that I need you to know something. I love you. I've always loved you. But I release you from any promises we made. Don't wait for me, Delilah. Don't spend years hoping for something that might never come. Live your life. Find happiness. Let yourself be loved by someone who can actually show up. You deserve a man who chooses you over his dreams, not someone who asks you to wait indefinitely while he figures out how to be the person he promised to be. I'm sorry I wasn't that man. I hope someday you'll forgive me. All my love. Samuel. Delilah read it twice, tears streaming down her face. Daniel's arms came around her from behind, holding her while she cried for the man who'd loved her enough to let her go even in death. He knew, she whispered. He knew he was asking too much. He loved you enough to want better for you. I spent 5 years waiting for someone who was telling me not to wait. You spent 5 years honoring love. That's not the same thing. Daniel turned her to face him, wiping tears from her cheeks. And now you're here, with me, building something new. That's what he wanted for you. How did Sarah get this? I gave it to her, found it in Samuel's things after the accident. Wasn't sure if you should ever see it, but Sarah said you'd need it someday. Said you'd need to know you had his blessing to move on. Delilah looked at her husband, and felt the last piece of her old life settle into place. Samuel had loved her. Daniel loved her. Both were true. Both mattered. But only one was here. Real present, choosing her every single day. Thank you, she said. For everything. For telling me the truth, for coming back, for writing stories for my students, for loving me when I was still learning how to let go. Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to marry me. I didn't just say yes, I proposed to you first. You did. He smiled, that beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. Most improper thing I've ever witnessed. Mrs. Henderson nearly fainted. Mrs. Henderson loved every second of it. They stood in their rented room holding each other while snow fell outside and the town settled into sleep. Tomorrow they'd move into the small house Daniel had been preparing on the Jacobson ranch. Tomorrow they'd start their married life. Tomorrow they'd face whatever came next. But tonight, they were just two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd chosen hope over bitterness, faith over fear, and love over the safety of staying closed off. No more waiting at fence posts, Delilah whispered against his chest. No more waiting, Daniel agreed. From now on, we face everything together. And for the first time in 5 years, Delilah believed in promises again. The house wasn't much: 2 rooms, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, and a porch that sagged on one end. But it was theirs. Delilah stood in the doorway that first morning as Daniel's wife, watching him carry in the last of her belongings from the boarding house. Everything she owned fit into 3 trunks and 2 wooden crates. A lifetime condensed into something that could be moved in a single wagon trip. I know it's small, Daniel said, setting down the final trunk. But the Jacobsons said I could add on once we save enough. Another bedroom, maybe expand the kitchen. It's perfect. It's falling apart. It's ours. She moved to him, slipping her arms around his waist. That makes it perfect. He kissed the top of her head, and she felt the tension drain from his shoulders. I want to give you more than this. I deserve exactly what I have. A good man, an honest life, a home to build together. She pulled back to look at him. Stop trying to give me what you think I should want, and start trusting that I want what we have. When did you get so wise? I spent 5 years being foolish. Had to balance it out somehow. They spent that first day making the house livable. Daniel fixed the porch while Delilah unpacked dishes and linens, organizing the small space into something resembling a home. By evening they had curtains on the windows, food in the pantry, and a bed that didn't creak too badly when they tested it. I have to be at the ranch before dawn, Daniel said that night, lying beside her in the darkness. Jacobson wants me checking the north pasture fence line. I know. And you have school. I know that too. So we won't see each other until evening. Delilah rolled over to face him. Daniel Ross, are you nervous about me being alone all day? No, maybe, yes. He sighed. I just married you yesterday. Feels wrong to leave you alone so soon. I've been alone for years. I think I can manage one day. That's not what I mean. His hand found hers in the dark. I mean, it feels wrong to have you and not be with you every minute, like I'm wasting time. We have the rest of our lives for minutes together. Go work. I'll teach. We'll meet back here when the sun goes down and pretend we haven't been thinking about each other all day. I won't have to pretend. She kissed him slow and deep, storing up the feeling for the long day ahead. Neither will I. True to his word, Daniel was gone before first light. Delilah woke to an empty bed and a note on the kitchen table. Thinking about you already. Come home to me tonight. D. She tucked the note into her dress pocket and walked to the schoolhouse the winter morning, sharp enough to make her eyes water. The children were already there when she arrived, Thomas bouncing with barely contained excitement. Mrs. Ross, you have to tell us everything about the wedding. Thomas, give her space to breathe, Emma said, ever the practical one at 12. But the other students crowded around anyway, all talking at once. What did her dress look like? What did they eat? Did Mr. Ross really write her stories? Was it true they were going to live on the Jacobson ranch? Delilah answered what she could, deflecting the more personal questions with practiced teacher efficiency. But underneath the questions and chatter, she felt something shift in how they looked at her. She wasn't just Miss Warren the teacher anymore. She was Mrs. Ross, the wife, someone who belonged to Clearwater in a way she hadn't before. The day passed in spelling lessons and arithmetic drills and the comfortable rhythm of teaching. But part of her mind kept wandering to Daniel, wondering what he was doing, whether he was cold, whether he was thinking about her too. When school ended, she cleaned slates and organized books, and walked home slowly, savoring the strange newness of having a home that wasn't a rented room. Smoke rose from the chimney as she approached. Daniel had beaten her back and started a fire. He met her at the door, still in his work clothes, smelling of horses and leather and winter air. How was your first day as a married woman? Long. How was yours as a married man? Longer. He pulled her inside and kissed her properly. I checked that fence line 3 times just to have something to do with my hands besides think about you. Very productive. Jacobson thinks I've lost my mind. Have you? Completely. He kissed her again, deeper this time. And I don't care. They fell into a routine over the next weeks. Daniel left at dawn, Delilah taught until afternoon, and they reunited in the evenings like people who'd been separated for years instead of hours. They cooked together, cleaned together, sat by the fire, reading while their legs tangled on the settee. On Sundays, they went to church, ate dinner with the Millers, and took long walks that usually ended with them kissing behind the barn like teenagers. Sarah caught them once and just laughed, saying she'd never seen 2 people more obviously besotted. Is it always like this? Delilah asked one night, lying in bed with her head on Daniel's chest. This feeling like I might burst if I'm not near you. I don't know. I've never felt this way before. Me neither, not even with Samuel. She felt him tense slightly under her. You don't have to. I want to talk about it. About him. She propped herself up on one elbow. I loved Samuel, but it was young love, the kind that's more about dreams than reality. We were going to build this perfect life, have this perfect marriage, be these perfect people. And it wasn't real. It was what we thought love should look like, not what it actually feels like. She touched his face, rough with evening stubble. This is real. You're real. The way you leave notes on the table and fix things without being asked, and listen when I talk about my students. That's what love actually looks like." Daniel's throat worked. "I worry sometimes that you settled. That you married me because I was here and available, not because you actually wanted me." "Daniel, I know what people say, that you moved on too fast, that you're still grieving that I took advantage of a vulnerable woman. Do you believe that?" "No, but I wonder if you do deep down." Delilah sat up, fully pulling the quilt around her shoulders. "Look at me. Really look at me." He did, his brown eyes uncertain in the lamplight. "I chose you," she said firmly. "Not because you were convenient, or because I was lonely, or because I was trying to replace Samuel. I chose you because you're kind and honest, and you make me laugh. Because you wrote stories for my students and rode through a blizzard to check on me. Because when I'm with you, I feel like the person I always wanted to be." "Delilah, I'm not done. You asked me to marry you, but I proposed first. Remember, I didn't wait for you to be ready, or for enough time to pass, or for the town to approve. I asked you because I knew, and I still know." She took his hand, pressed it against her heart. "Feel that? That's what certainty feels like. So stop worrying about what people say, and trust what I'm telling you." He pulled her back down, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I love you. God, I love you so much it scares me." "I love you too. And you don't have to be scared. Easy for you to say. You're not terrified of losing this. I'm terrified every day, but I'm doing it anyway." They lay there in the darkness, holding each other against fears both spoken and unspoken, until sleep finally claimed them. March arrived with false promises of spring. The snow melted for 3 days, then came back with a vengeance. Delilah woke one morning to Daniel cursing at the window. "What's wrong?" "Blizzard coming. Big one by the looks of it." He was already pulling on his warmest clothes. "I need to get to the ranch, help move the cattle to shelter before it hits." "How long will you be gone?" "However long it takes. Could be a day, could be 3. He stopped, turning to face her. "Will you be all right? You could stay in town at the boarding house." "I'll be fine here." "Delilah." "I'll be fine. I have firewood and food and books. Go do what you need to do." He kissed her hard and fast, then was gone into the pre-dawn darkness. Delilah watched from the window as he rode toward the Jacobson ranch, then set about preparing for the storm. By noon, the snow was falling so thick she could barely see the barn. By evening, the wind howled like something alive and angry. She fed the fire-made soup she barely tasted and tried not to think about Daniel out in that weather. The first day passed, then the second. On the third day, the storm finally broke, leaving the world buried under snow that came up to her thighs. Delilah dug a path to the barn, fed the chickens Daniel had bought her the week before, and tried to ignore the fear gnawing at her stomach. He should be back by now. Unless something had gone wrong. Unless he was hurt, or lost, or... She cut off the thought. He was fine. He had to be fine. Late that afternoon, she heard hoofbeats. She ran to the door so fast she nearly slipped on the icy porch. Daniel rode up, looking half frozen and exhausted, but whole. Alive. "Here." "You're back," she said stupidly. "Of course I'm back." He slid from the saddle, wincing. "Did you think I wouldn't come back?" "I thought the storm was so bad and you were gone so long, and I started imagining..." Her voice broke. He was up the porch steps in 2 strides, pulling her against him. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We had cattle scattered across 3 miles, took forever to round them up. I should have sent word somehow." "You're here. That's what matters." She pulled back to look at him. "You're freezing. Come inside." She stripped off his wet clothes, wrapped him in every blanket they owned, and made him drink hot coffee while sitting as close to the fire as possible. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the cup. "You could have died out there," she said quietly. "I know. Daniel, I know." He set down the cup and took her hands. But I didn't. I'm here. I'm always going to come back to you, understand, no matter what. You can't promise that. Watch me." They were both crying now, the fear and relief spilling over in equal measure. She climbed into his lap, blankets and all, and held him like she could keep him safe through sheer force of will. "I can't lose you," she whispered against his neck. "I already lost one person I loved. I can't do it again." "You won't. I'm not going anywhere." Samuel probably thought that too. Daniel pulled back to look at her. "Samuel didn't choose to leave you. But I'm choosing to stay. Every single day I'm choosing you, and this life, and this home we're building. That's got to count for something. It counts for everything." They stayed like that until full dark, wrapped around each other. Daniel's body slowly warming under the blankets, and Delilah's fear slowly easing into something manageable. The incident changed something between them, made them more careful with goodbyes, more deliberate about coming home. Daniel started leaving notes every morning, small reminders that he was thinking about her, that he'd be back. Delilah started watching the clock in her classroom, counting down hours until she could walk home and find him there. April brought real spring. Finally, the snow melting into mud, and the mud drying into packed earth. Green shoots appeared in Delilah's small garden. The chickens started laying more eggs, and the whole world felt like it was waking up. One evening, Daniel came home with news. Jacobson's selling off some of his land, 10 acres on the south edge of his property right next to our house. He was trying to sound casual and failing completely. I asked how much he wanted for it. Delilah's heart started pounding. "And more than we have. But he said he'd hold it for us if we can come up with half now and the rest over time." Daniel sat down heavily at the table. "I've been saving everything extra from my wages. If you could spare anything from your teaching salary—" "How much do we need?" he told her. It was a staggering amount, more than she made in 6 months of teaching. "We can't afford it," she said flatly. "Not yet. But maybe by next year." "Daniel." She sat down across from him. "Why is this so important to you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I want to give you something that's really ours. Not a house on someone else's land, not a job that could disappear if Jacobson decides to sell the whole ranch. I want to build something permanent with you, something that can't be taken away. We already have that. Do we? Or do we just have a temporary arrangement that feels permanent because we want it to be?" Delilah reached across the table, taking both his hands. "The house could burn down tomorrow. The land could wash away in a flood. Nothing in this life is permanent except what we choose to make permanent. And I choose you. Every day I choose you. That's the only permanence that matters." "I know. I just—" He struggled for words. "I want to deserve you, and I feel like I can't do that until I can provide real security. You deserve me because you love me, because you're good and kind and you show up every single day, not because of how much land you own or how much money you have." She squeezed his hands. "But if buying land matters to you, then we'll figure it out. We'll save every penny. I'll take on extra students if anyone wants tutoring. We'll make it work." "You'd do that. I'd do anything for you. Haven't you figured that out yet?" He came around the table and pulled her up into his arms, holding her with a fierceness that spoke of all the fears he tried to keep hidden. "What did I do to deserve you? You showed up at a fence post and asked what kept me waiting. Then you stayed." They decided to try, to save everything they could, to ask Jacobson to hold the land as long as possible, to hope that somehow they'd figure it out. It meant no extras, no luxuries, every spare cent going into a tin box they kept hidden under a floorboard. But they had each other, and most days that felt like enough. In May, Delilah realized her monthly bleeding was late. Then later. Then not coming at all. She told herself it didn't mean anything. Stress could delay things, the change in routine, the physical work of maintaining a home. But her breasts were tender, and she was tired in a way that felt different from ordinary exhaustion. She didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. Not until she was sure. But Sarah knew. Sarah took one look at her at Sunday dinner and pulled her aside. "How far along are you?" I'm not." Delilah stopped. "How did you know?" "You've been touching your stomach all evening, and you barely ate anything, just pushed food around your plate." Sarah's eyes were kind. "Have you told Daniel?" "I'm not sure yet. It's only been 6 weeks since my last. I could be wrong." "Are you hoping you're wrong?" The question hit harder than expected. "No. God, no. I want this. We're barely making it as it is. We're trying to save for land, the house needs repairs, and now a baby." Her voice cracked. "What if we can't manage it?" "You'll manage because you don't have a choice. That's how everyone manages." Sarah pulled her into a hug. "Tell him. He deserves to know." That night, lying in bed with Daniel's arm around her, Delilah finally found the courage. "I need to tell you something." "All right." He shifted to look at her. "Should I be worried?" "That depends on how you feel about being a father." The silence stretched so long she started to panic. Then Daniel's hand moved slowly, carefully, to rest on her still flat stomach. "You're sure?" "Not completely, but all the signs are there." "A baby." His voice was rough with emotion. "We're having a baby. Are you happy? Because if you're not, I understand we didn't plan this and money's tight and—" He kissed her, cutting off the rambling. "I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. But yes, I'm happy. God, Delilah, I'm so happy, I don't have words for it." She started crying relief and joy, and hormones all tangling together. "We can't afford this. We'll figure it out. The house is too small. We'll add on. I don't know how to be a mother. And I don't know how to be a father. We'll learn together." He pulled her close, his hand still on her stomach. "We'll figure all of it out together." June brought confirmation from the doctor she was definitely pregnant, likely due in December. The news spread through Clearwater like wildfire, generating the usual mix of congratulations and whispered calculations about when exactly the baby had been conceived. Delilah ignored the gossip and focused on teaching through increasing nausea and exhaustion. Daniel threw himself into preparing, adding a room onto the house building, a cradle, doing everything he could to make their home ready for a child. One evening in late June, he came home with a stunned expression. "Jacobson wants to sell me the land." Delilah looked up from the shirt she was mending. "I thought we didn't have enough." "We don't, but he heard about the baby. Said he remembers what it's like trying to start a family with nothing. He'll sell it to me for half what he originally asked, and I can pay the rest over 5 years. No interest." "Daniel, that's incredibly generous." "I know." He sat down hard on the settee. "I told him we'd need to think about it." "Think about it? Why would we need to think about it?" "Because it still means being in debt for 5 years. Because if something goes wrong, if I lose my job or get hurt or—" He stopped. "I don't want to put us in a position where we could lose everything." Delilah set down her mending and moved to sit beside him. "We're already in a position where we could lose everything. That's called being alive. The question isn't whether we'll face hard times, we will. The question is whether we face them with something we're building toward, or whether we stay small and safe and scared." "You sound very certain for someone who spent 5 years waiting at a fence." "I learned from my mistakes, and the biggest one wasn't the waiting. It was believing that staying still was safer than moving forward." She took his hand. "Buy the land, Daniel. Build our future on it. And if we fail, at least we'll fail trying to create something beautiful." He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "When did you get so brave?" "When I married a man worth being brave for." They signed the papers the next week. 10 acres of Wyoming grassland, a house that was slowly becoming a home, and a baby on the way. It wasn't the life Delilah had imagined at 18, standing in Boston, dreaming about the future with Samuel. It was better. Because it was real. Because it was earned. Because it was built on truth instead of dreams, on showing up instead of hoping, on choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. On their 6-month anniversary, Daniel took her to the fence post. The same one where she'd waited for 5 years, where he'd first approached her, where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. "I have something for you," he said. He'd hammered a small brass plaque into the wood. She leaned closer to read it, for Delilah who waited faithfully. For Daniel who found her. For the life we're building together. She was crying before she finished reading it. "It's perfect." "No more waiting here," he said, pulling her close. "From now on, this marks where our story started, where we found each other, where I stopped waiting and started living, where we both did." They stood there as the sun set, watching the horizon together, not with hope for something to appear, but with gratitude for what they'd already found. And when they walked home that evening, they didn't look back. The baby came early. December 1st, 3 weeks before the doctor had predicted, on a night when Daniel was supposed to be home, but got caught helping Jacobson with a breached calf. Delilah woke to pain that stole her breath and water soaking the sheets beneath her. She managed to get to the door, managed to scream for help into the darkness. Their nearest neighbor heard her somehow, Mrs. Patterson, whose husband worked the adjacent property. She came running in her nightgown and boots, took one look at Delilah, and sent her youngest boy racing for the doctor. "Where's Daniel?" Mrs. Patterson demanded, helping Delilah back to bed. "Ranch, the Jacobson place. There was a calf." Another contraction hit harder than the first. "Lord help us." "All right, sweetheart. We're doing this without him. You're strong. You can do this." But Delilah wasn't sure she was strong enough. The pain came in waves that felt like dying, like being torn apart from the inside. She screamed for Daniel, for her mother 3,000 miles away in Boston, for anyone to make it stop. The doctor arrived an hour later, grim-faced and efficient. "Where's your husband?" "Not here," Mrs. Patterson said shortly. "So we make do." They made do for 6 hours. 6 hours of pain and blood and terror. Delilah was convinced she was dying, convinced the baby was dying, convinced this was punishment for moving on too quickly from Samuel. Then Daniel burst through the door, covered in blood and birth fluids from the calf, his face white with panic. "Delilah, God! Delilah, I came as fast as I could." "Get out," the doctor snapped. "This is no place for a man." "Like hell I'm leaving." Daniel shoved past him to Delilah's side, taking her hand. "I'm here. I'm right here." She wanted to scream at him for being late, for not being there when she needed him. Instead, she gripped his hand hard enough to hurt and bore down as the doctor instructed. The baby came 20 minutes later, a girl tiny and red-faced and screaming with remarkable volume for something so small. "She's perfect," the doctor said, wrapping her quickly. "Small, but her lungs are strong. That's a good sign." He placed the baby in Delilah's arms, and the world tilted. This was her daughter, hers and Daniel's. A whole person they'd made together, who had her father's dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin already visible in miniature. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered, touching the baby's impossibly tiny hand. "God, Delilah, look what we made." "We're calling her Rose," Delilah said. She hadn't known she'd decided until the words came out. "Rose after your mother." Daniel's face crumpled. "You don't have to." "I want to. Your mother would have loved her." They spent the first night as parents in a haze of exhaustion and wonder. Rose nursed fitfully, cried often, and slept in short bursts that left them both hollow-eyed. But every time Delilah looked at her daughter, every time she watched Daniel hold their child with heartbreaking gentleness, she felt something expand in her chest that had nothing to do with milk coming in. This was what she'd been waiting for all along. Not Samuel, not some perfect dream future. This, the messy, terrifying, beautiful reality of building a life worth living. The town descended on them within days. Sarah brought food and advice. Mrs. Henderson knitted blankets. The school children made cards and drawings. Even Jacobson stopped by with a bottle of whiskey for Daniel and a promise that he could take a week off work. You only get one chance at these early days, Jacobson said gruffly. Don't waste them in my barn. So Daniel stayed home learning alongside Delilah how to change diapers and soothe crying and survive on no sleep. They took shifts through the night, one sleeping while the other walked Rose in circles around the small house, trying every trick to ease her colicky screaming. I'm failing at this, Delilah said one night at 3 a.m, tears streaming down her face while Rose wailed in her arms. I can't even feed my own child without her crying. You're not failing. She's just fussy. Daniel took the baby, bouncing her gently. My ma used to say some babies come into the world angry about leaving heaven. Takes them a while to adjust to earth. What if I'm not a good mother? You're already a good mother. You're here. You're trying. You're loving her even when it's hard. That's all any parent can do. Rose finally settled around 4, falling into exhausted sleep in Daniel's arms. He transferred her carefully to the cradle he'd built, then crawled into bed beside Delilah. We're going to survive this, right? She whispered. We're going to do more than survive. We're going to build something beautiful with her. By Rose's 2-month mark, things had eased somewhat. The colic had passed, nursing had gotten easier, and they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Delilah returned to teaching part-time, bringing Rose with her to the schoolhouse. The older students fought over who got to hold her during lessons. Thomas was particularly smitten. At 10 years old now, living permanently with the Millers, he'd become Rose's unofficial guardian. He sat next to her cradle during class, alerted Delilah immediately if she fussed, and declared to anyone who'd listen that Rose was his sister, even if they didn't share blood. You're good with her, Delilah told him one afternoon. Mr. and Mrs. Miller are teaching me. They say family isn't just blood, it's who you choose to love. He looked up at her with eyes that had lost some of their earlier hollowness. Like how you chose Mr. Ross, even though you loved someone else first, and how Mr. Ross chose to stay in Clearwater, even though he could have gone anywhere. Out of the mouths of children again. That's exactly right. So I'm choosing Rose, and you, and Mr. Ross, and the Millers. That's my family now. Delilah pulled him into a hug, this boy who'd lost his mother and found a town willing to love him back into wholeness. Spring came late that year, snow lingering well into April. But when it finally arrived, it brought news that changed everything. Daniel came home one evening looking shell-shocked. Jacobson's selling the ranch. Delilah's stomach dropped. What? Why? His wife's sister in California is sick. They're moving to care for her. Daniel sat down heavily. He's selling everything, the cattle, the land, the house. Everything. What does that mean for us? I don't know. The new owner might keep me on, might hire his own people. Could go either way. He ran his hands through his hair. We have the 10 acres. We could build on that, try to make it work on our own. But without my wages from the ranch. We'll figure it out. Delilah. We will. We always do. She moved to sit beside him, Rose sleeping against her shoulder. What do you want to do? If you could choose anything, what would you choose? He was quiet for a long moment. I'd want to ranch our own land. Nothing huge, just enough to support us. Maybe run some cattle, breed horses. Build something that's completely ours. Then that's what we'll do. We don't have the money. We have 10 acres and a house and each other. We have your knowledge and my teaching salary. We have a town full of people who'd help if we asked. She shifted Rose carefully. You told me once that you wanted to build something permanent with me. Here's our chance. It could fail. It could succeed. We have a baby now. We can't afford to fail. We can't afford not to try. Delilah took his hand. I didn't survive 5 years of waiting and grieving and learning to love again just to play it safe now. Let's be brave. Let's build something extraordinary. Daniel looked at her, at their daughter, at the home they'd already created against impossible odds. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They made the decision that night. Daniel would leave the Jacobson ranch when it sold, and they'd use every penny of savings to buy 4 cows and a young bull. It wasn't enough to make a real living yet, but it was a start. They'd grow slowly, carefully building their herd and their life one season at a time. The town thought they were insane, building a ranch from nothing with a baby and barely any capital. But the town had thought Delilah was insane for waiting 5 years too, and she'd survived that judgment just fine. Sarah was the only one who understood. "You're doing what we did 30 years ago. It's hard, and it's scary, and half the time you'll want to quit. But if you make it, you'll have something nobody can ever take from you." "What if we don't make it?" "Then you'll have tried. That's more than most people can say." The Jacobson Ranch sold in June to a cattle baron from Texas who brought his own crew. Daniel's last day was bittersweet, saying goodbye to land. He'd worked for 2 years, to a job that had brought him to Clearwater and to Delilah. "New chapter," he said, riding home that final evening. "New chapter," she agreed. They spent that summer working harder than either had ever worked. Daniel built fences and cleared brush and repaired the barn that had come with their property. Delilah taught summer lessons for extra money and managed the house and cared for Rose, who was crawling now and getting into everything. They ate, simply spent nothing on extras, and fell into bed exhausted every night. But they were building something. Slowly, painfully, one fence post and one calf at a time, they were creating the life they'd dreamed about. In August, their first calf was born, a healthy heifer that Daniel immediately declared was good breeding stock. He walked around for a week, looking proud as any new father, checking on that calf a dozen times a day. "You're ridiculous," Delilah told him, watching from the porch while he examined the calf yet again. "This is our future, our foundation. Of course I'm checking on her." "It's a cow, Daniel. She's the first cow we bred and birthed on our own land. That makes her significant." Rose babbled agreement from her blanket, reaching for her toes. By Rose's first birthday in December, they had 8 head of cattle and were breaking even. Not making much profit, but not losing money either. It was enough to keep going, to keep believing they could make it work. The town had stopped whispering about their foolishness and started watching with cautious respect. The Boston schoolteacher and her cowboy husband were actually pulling it off. Winter was hard. They ran low on feed and had to buy extra at prices that hurt. Daniel worked himself ragged, keeping the cattle fed and watered. Delilah took on additional students for tutoring, earning whatever she could. But they survived. And when spring came again, bringing new calves and green grass, and hope, they celebrated by planting trees along their fence line. "What kind of trees?" Thomas asked, helping dig holes. "Cottonwoods," Daniel said. "They grow fast and provide shade. Someday they'll mark the boundaries of our land, show everyone who passes that this place belongs to the Ross family." That's a long time from now. That's the point. We're building for the long term, for Rose and whatever other children we have, for their children after them. He glanced at Delilah. "We're building something that lasts." On their second anniversary, Daniel took Delilah back to the fence post. The brass plaque had weathered beautifully, the words still clear. "I have something to add," he said. He pulled out a second smaller plaque and hammered it below the first. Here she stopped waiting. Here they started building. Here love proved stronger than grief. Delilah traced the words with shaking fingers. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This life we're making is perfect even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." They stood there, Rose toddling between them, looking out at the land they were shaping with their own hands. The house had grown. They'd added 2 more rooms, including a nursery that Delilah suspected would need expanding soon, based on her recently missed monthly bleeding. The cattle had multiplied. The trees were taking root. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked quietly. "Marrying me instead of waiting longer for certainty?" "Not once. Not ever." She turned to face him fully. "I spent 5 years waiting for certainty that never came. You taught me that uncertainty is part of love, part of life. We don't get guarantees, we just get choices." And you chose this. I chose you. Every day I keep choosing you." He kissed her there at the fence post, with Rose giggling at their feet, and the Wyoming wind carrying the smell of grass and cattle and possibility. 5 years later, the ranch had grown beyond their initial dreams. 20 head of cattle, 3 horses chickens that actually laid enough eggs to sell the extras. Daniel had hired help during busy seasons. Delilah still taught, though she'd cut back to 3 days a week with 3 children, now Rose and twin boys, who'd arrived 2 years ago, like a tornado disguised as babies. Thomas lived with them half the time, officially adopted by the Millers, but considering both families his own. He helped with the ranch work and talked about maybe buying land adjacent to theirs someday, building something beside the people who'd saved him. The house had been expanded twice more. The trees along the fence line were taller than Daniel now, and the brass plaques at the old fence post had been joined by a third, added on their 5th anniversary, for the children raised here, for the life built together, for proving that love rewritten is still love. Delilah stood at that fence post on a summer evening watching her children play in the yard while Daniel finished evening chores. Rose was 7 now, teaching her brothers how to collect eggs without scaring the chickens. Thomas rode the fence line checking for breaks, nearly grown at 15. She thought about the woman she'd been at 23, standing at this same spot, writing letters to silence. That woman had been so certain about what love looked like, what life should be. She'd been wrong about almost everything, but she'd been right about one thing: loyalty mattered. Keeping promises mattered. Faith mattered. She'd just been practicing them on the wrong things. The real promise had never been to Samuel. It had been to herself, to keep believing that love was possible, that life could be good, that waiting with hope was better than giving up with bitterness. And when she'd finally stopped waiting for what couldn't come back and started building what could actually exist, everything had changed. Daniel finished at the barn and walked toward her, still moving with that quiet confidence that had first caught her attention 7 years ago. He'd aged well, lines around his eyes from squinting at horizons, calluses on his hands from building their life gray, starting at his temples that somehow made him more handsome. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "That I'm glad I stopped waiting." "Me too." "And that I'm pregnant again." He went completely still. Completely. "What?" "About 8 weeks, I think. I was going to tell you at dinner, but—" She shrugged. "I'm telling you now." Daniel lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed. The children came running, demanding to know what was happening. Thomas rode up, grinning, having clearly overheard. "Another baby!" Rose shrieked. "Can it be a girl this time, please?" "We'll find out in a few months," Delilah said, still laughing as Daniel set her down. "We're going to need another room," he said, looking dazed. "We always need another room." "How do you feel about it? Are you happy?" She looked at him, at their children, at the land they'd shaped together, at the life they'd built from grief and hope and stubborn determination to keep choosing each other. "I'm terrified and exhausted and completely overwhelmed," she said. "But yes, I'm happy. Are you?" "I'm everything you just said, but mostly I'm grateful." He pulled her close, careful of her still flat stomach. "Grateful you stopped waiting at that fence post. Grateful you gave me a chance. Grateful for every single day since. Even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones. They're what make the good ones mean something." They stood there as the sun set, surrounded by children and chickens, and the life they'd built from nothing but faith and determination. The fence post stood behind them, no longer a place of waiting, but a marker of transformation. A reminder that sometimes the love you thought you needed isn't the love you were meant to find. Sometimes you have to let go of the dream to grab hold of reality. Sometimes the cowboy who asks what keeps you waiting becomes the reason you stop. Sometimes loyalty to the past is just practice for loyalty to the future. Rose ran up and grabbed Delilah's hand. "Mama, are you crying?" "Happy tears, sweetheart." Those are the best kind. They were. The very best kind. That night, after the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, Daniel and Delilah sat on their porch watching stars emerge. The same stars that had hung over the fence post 7 years ago, over every hard decision and small triumph and moment of choosing to keep going. No more waiting at fence posts. Delilah said softly, the words that had become their promise to each other. Daniel's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and solid and real. No more waiting, just building, just living, just loving what we have instead of mourning what we lost. Just facing the horizon together. Together, he agreed. Always together. And in the morning, when the sun rose over their land and their children and their life built from grief, transformed into joy, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything since the day he came back, side by side, choosing each other. Proving that the strongest love isn't the one that never breaks, it's the one that learns to build something beautiful from the broken pieces.